Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 14 of Shelf Review, where today I will be going over C.S. Lewis's Perelandra. Now, this book is the second in a series, or not a series, a trilogy of books that are a science fiction collection by C.S. Lewis. The first book is called Out of the Silent Planet, and it's honestly a really good book. I would highly recommend it to anyone, and especially since then it can lead to you reading Perelandra, which is also a very good book. I don't know if it's Perelandra, I say Perelandra, but I believe it's Perelandra because it's Perelandra. So I guess I'll say Perelandra. Perelandra. So Perelandra is a science fiction novel by C.S. Lewis, and it discusses miscellaneous adventures of a man by the name of Dr. Ransom. That's his name. And Ransom was previously upon Mars in Out of the Silent Planet, where he met up with different beings and all that, and he ends up learning of Maeldiel, who is essentially the god of this universe. And though there are a lot of similarities to biblical stories, at the beginning of Perelandra, Lewis states that there is no allegory meant to be played, and similarities are just coincidental. So this is not supposed to be a theological allegory, like things such as the Chronicles of Narnia. So that is a cool separation, but it is also kind of blatant how inspired some of the stories were by biblical text. But, it's not a detriment anyway. But, so after that, we are introduced to a character who I don't even remember their name because they're only in the book for two chapters. And, they're just briefly spoke about, and they are tasked with going to see, they're friends with Dr. Ransom, and they're tasked with going to see Ransom at night, and they end up going, and Ransom's like, okay, I need you to watch out at my home for as long as it takes for me to get back, because I'm going to space in this light coffin that Maeldiel was like, all right, you got to go to Venus, and because Perelandra is Venus, so I guess I'll just refer to it as Venus, but, so this dude is tasked with waiting for Ransom to come back, and then we see, I believe it was after 10, no, it wasn't 10. I don't know if the exact time that he was on Venus is specified, but it was a relatively long time because it speaks about his garden being grown up and all that. But he ends up going, and they see him lift away into the sky, and he has to ultimately recruit a doctor just in case Dr. Ransom comes back injured. So he ends up getting the doctor, and eventually they are made aware that Dr. Ransom is coming back. So they go and they wait for him, and he comes back and he has a story to tell to all of them. And we are taught the story, given the story through Dr. Ransom's retelling to the two people and the doctor. The doctor and the other guy. So first we have him landing on Venus. And Venus in this book is odd because, there are islands, but there's two types of islands. With these islands, we have floating islands, which float throughout this body of liquid, and we have a fixed island. I don't believe there's ever discussed to be multiple. I believe there's just the one fixed island. And the fixed islands are just like regular land. They're like normal continents in Earth, or this Philcondra in the series. But, yes, with that, so we end up just Ransom just kind of going around exploring, learning his surroundings, and he meets with this little red dragon thing, and he just sees some of the wildlife, the foliage, and all that. He tries this fruit that I believe is similar to a peach of some sort. No, it's a gourd, and he eats it. He believes it's one of the best foods he's ever tasted. Once he gets back, it's mentioned that, back to Earth, it's mentioned that he never finds anything that tasted as good as that. So with that, we end up progressing, and then eventually Lewis catches sight of this odd figure on one of the other floating islands. He's like, what is this? So as the island is progressively floating, he realizes that it is a person, and then eventually he realizes it's a woman. And this woman is a green woman. And he eventually tries to get in contact with her, and she kind of laughs and scoffs him up. But then, after that, he ends up, and then he goes along, and ends up making contact with her via swimming to her island. So after that, she, I guess they just kind of chatted up. She kind of learns about him, and just to, clear the air, both of them are naked, but it's due to her innocence as a human that Ransom doesn't feel. And Ransom's just a respectable guy. He's just a good guy. So there's nothing going on there. They're just two chill people, and they just happen to be naked. But, yes, with that, so we move along, and eventually, while they're talking, they're yapping up, learning more about each other, and Ransom learns that there is another person on that world, but only other one person, and he goes by the King. and he calls the Green Lady, or the Lady. And with that, they end up figuring out that the king essentially has rule over the lady, kind of just a patriarchal system, even though it's not really a system, so they're just two people. But and he learns that she cannot sleep on the fixed land because it is forbidden by the king, though they don't know why. Then after that, they see a object fall out of space, and they go and check out what this object is, and it's another human. It is Weston, Dr. Weston. Well, they just call him Weston predominantly, so I'll just say Weston. But Weston is the antagonist of the previous book, who was taking ransom to Malcandra, which is Mars in the first book, to sacrifice him to the beings that were on there, but they didn't want a human sacrifice. But so it is Weston, and Weston has come this time, but he seems to not be absolutely himself. He seems to be under the possession of some malicious spirit. Now, I guess if it were to be an actual allegory for the Bible, this would be Satan or Lucifer, the snake, the serpent, whatever you want to call it. But with that, we see a just line of dialogue throughout where Weston is attempting to tempt the Green Lady to become older. To become older in this world is to become more knowledgeable, to become, I guess, more resistant to authority. Because he's telling her stories about how the women of our earth are respected. They are seen as makers of man. They're seen as just everything. And he's trying to convince the Green Lady that she should be viewed as this, and that it is her right to be so. And he's just teaching her that she could have so much more greatness if she didn't just fall to the authority of the king, and if she was her own person. And he just tells her so many things of humanity that are twisted and wrong, essentially. Not wrong, that is not wrong, don't get me wrong. No, okay. I guess I need to rephrase that. But he just tells her, feeds her essentially temptations, which, if it were the Bible, it would be sins. And so, with that, we move along, and we see as Weston is struggling. He doesn't know how to word his words, because he's been sent here as the messenger of Melville to fight whatever was supposed to, I guess, afflict him. And now we've learned what was supposed to afflict the people of Perelandra, or Venus. And he doesn't know how to fight it, because he doesn't know what she'll respond to. He doesn't feel like he can make a connection with her, because she's an alien. And he just gets down on himself, and eventually he comes to the realization that after a certain incident, is that Weston and the Green Lady end up coming to him, and they're clothed, because Weston has told her that clothing is a thing of beauty. Now, Ransom is relieved, because he believed that he had taught her the, I guess, facets and intricacies of sexuality, rather than just teaching her vanity and just beauty. And he ends up showing her a reflection of herself through a pocket mirror he has. So he's attempting to manipulate her and corrupt her through vanity. And like I said, Ransom was glad that it wasn't through sexuality. But then they go on, because prior on in the book, actually, Weston has brief intercessions where he's himself again, rather than the unman, which it's called. And he believes that Ransom was trying to seduce the Green Lady, even though it was nothing like that, because they were both naked. But then after that, Ransom comes to the realization that he's not going to be able to affect the Green Lady. He's just going to have to beat the crap out of Weston. So we have this battle, and it's just brutal, because they're both like clothesless. They're using teeth, nails, and fists. And this is really just to do the accumulation of things, because he's been trying to tempt the Green Lady, but he's also been destroying the nature. He's been killing a bunch of animals, and this is just viewed as really wrong by Ransom. So they end up fighting, and Ransom ends up breaking Weston's leg, and Weston gives Ransom a bite on the heel that is just continually brought up throughout the story after this. But eventually they duke it out, and Weston kind of comes to his senses again. And after this, they just kind of have some more dialogue, communication about morality and stuff like that, and how their view of the Perelandrans is, and just everything. And so with that, you then progress along, and eventually the Unman ends up taking over Weston again, and ultimately Ransom ends up killing him, because there was no other way to deal with him, because the Unman was going to keep, I guess, triumphing over Weston. And it's kind of sad when Weston originally gains his consciousness back, because he's frightened. He doesn't know where he is. He's afraid that the natives have done something to them, and Ransom's like, "Who are you?" He's wondering if he's the Unman or if he's Weston. And it's just kind of sad, because Weston, I mean, he had kind of changed his philosophy on extraterrestrials. Like, he had when he was on Malacandra, but the Unman has essentially spoiled all of this, and therefore Weston had to die. And so they end up progressing along, and there's like this mountain scene where Ransom trying to climb a mountain, and there's a fire, and eventually Ransom ends up burying Weston and ends up inscribing something on a wall just to mark where Weston is buried and all that. And so we end up progressing along, and eventually, well, I'm sorry, I forgot this point, but before they battled, they were put, all of the organisms on Perelandra or Venus were put into a deep sleep so that no one would see the brutality going on. And after this, we learned that all the animals were once again reawakened after the Unman had been killed. And we then see that the Green Lady and the King were reunited. And the Green Lady has been rid of her temptations, which Weston and the Unman had fed to her continuously. And she realizes the folly of them, and she just becomes, I guess, a more pure person. And she's, I guess, re-purified. And just with that, we kind of have a little happy ending where we see the King and Queen re-meet up, and then the gods of each planet, which are, they're named by their planets, because Malacandra is a god and Perelandra is a god, and they come up, meet with Weston and them, and discuss things till they end up meeting with the King and the Queen, or the King and the Green Lady, and just talking with them briefly while they're kind of getting wed and just reacquainting themselves. And then after that, we know what happens, because we know that Ransom then returns back to Earth, and that is it. So I really liked Perelandra. I honestly don't know if I liked it more than Out of the Silent Planet, because I kind of liked the action of Out of the Silent Planet and kind of the thriller aspects to it. But I also liked Perelandra due to the philosophical aspects of it, because it did have a lot of deep conversations I couldn't really go over, because it was just really deep, and I couldn't remember most of it, because it was just, I guess, so abundant throughout the whole story. Because there was times where there's pages upon pages with just discussion of this, especially when Weston was trying to tempt the Green Lady, and when Weston and Ransom were discussing after Weston re-woke up after being possessed by the Unman in their little battle. But yeah, so it was really good. Both of them, I would honestly say they're probably equal in terms of entertainment, because both of them have their phenomenal qualities to them. And I just really have enjoyed both of them. I can't wait to read The Hideous Strength, which is the third book in the series, because I'm just ready to see what happens. Because I've read the back of it, and apparently the forces come to Earth this time to fight against the humans. So I'm ready to see how that goes. And once again, this was just a phenomenal piece by C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis has yet to miss out of all that I've read by him. But yeah, Perelandra, very, very good book. I would highly recommend it to anyone, especially those who have read Out of the Silent Planet. And I mean, it can even be read in seclusion, because, I mean, even Lewis states that at the beginning of the book, along with the theological allegory, I guess, going against that. But he discusses that at the beginning of the book, that it can be read on its own. You will have recurring characters like Weston and Ransom, but you don't really have to have much knowledge on them, because it kind of provides that background knowledge to you. So yeah, it is a book that can be read by anyone. So I would highly recommend anyone reading it, especially those who are interested in kind of baseline theology and philosophy stuff. Even though it's not a theological book, it has those underlying elements. And if you know the story of Genesis, you will really enjoy it, because you'll see all the similarities between Genesis and the serpent and Weston and Eve and the Green Lady. And I guess kind of Ransom is kind of playing the role of God in this, because he is the one who is trying to stop the temptation from happening, even though God didn't try to stop the temptation from happening, because he gave man free will out of his love for them. So yeah, really good book, highly recommend it. And that will be it for episode 14 of Shelf Review. And I believe the next one will probably be over the anime movie A Silent Voice, because I watched that recently and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, you'll probably be getting that on, I'd say, Wednesday. So yeah, thank you for watching.